Welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie, a slice of faith for our messy lives. I'm Tony Kolenc, a professor at Ave Maria School of Law down in Naples, Florida. I'm also the father of 5 grown children and the author of inspirational fiction for teens and adults. Speaking of which, I'm excited because December 3rd, Loyola Press has now announced, is the release date for the final installment of my medieval teen fiction series. It takes place in 12th century England. Final book, book 6, is called The Devil's Ransom, and it is going to tie up all the loose ends. I'm really excited. It's going to drop just in time for Christmas. And today I will be speaking with Leslea Wahl about the true meaning of Halloween, as explored in The Shadows short story anthology from CatholicTeenBooks.com. My guest today is Leslea Wahl, the author of award-winning Catholic teen mysteries, including The Perfect Blind Side, Into the Spotlight, her release earlier this year, Charting the Course, and a new release coming out for her this December, In Plain Sight. She's also one of the co-founders of the website CatholicTeenBooks.com, and she not only writes for teens, but she also has become a reviewer of Catholic teen fiction to help other families discover faith-based books. She lives in Colorado with her husband. Leslea, so glad to have you back on the show again.
Oh, it's always so fun to chat with you, especially about our passion of books here.
Yes, and it's kind of funny because we've done a few interviews about this Shadows anthology that we're going to be talking about today. And the two of us have teamed up on other people's shows, but it made sense, and we're heading towards Halloween again, to go ahead and talk about this brand new release. But before I do that, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your 2 latest releases.
Thanks. It's always fun to be able to share about my books. So the last book that came out of mine was Charting the Course, and then in December I have another one coming out, In Plain Sight, and they are part of a series called Finding Faith. Each book is about a different teen girl who finds her own pathway to finding her and discovering her faith and deepening it. And like you said, I always love adding mysteries to all my books and so forth. So this one was a fun one too, and it's set in Minnesota in January, which I lived in Minnesota for a few years, and those winters I remember so fondly and brutally too. So it was fun to write about those.
So, all right. So the Shadows anthology that we're going to be talking about here, I wanted us to set the stage for this. What is Shadows, and why did we pick this particular topic, and why are we releasing it in October or September time period?
Catholic Teen Books, this is the 5th anthology of short story collections with numerous authors contributing. We had Secrets, which, as the title says, they all just had something to do with the secret. And we had Ashes, which is for Lent. Gifts, it has Christmas theme. And we did one, Treasures, that they all have a relic of St. Patrick that goes through the stories. T.M. Gowett was the first one who kind of kept saying she'd love to do one around, All Souls Day, All Saints Day, and All Hallows Eve. So we thought that could be really fun, and the stories could just be a little bit spookier. This is a way to kind of let people know that the faith base behind those different holidays.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Halloween just gets bigger and bigger every year. We get more horror movies, more people decorating for Halloween, sometimes then for Christmas, it seems. And so it is pretty neat that Catholic Teen Books decided to kind of do a focal point on, what are we calling it? The All Hallowtide? Maybe give us a little background, because all of the stories in this anthology take place on one or more of the days in this Triduum. And again, most people might not even recognize, like you said, that there is this Catholic connection to Halloween.
And I actually wasn't aware of that either, really, for a long time. So it's kind of interesting. And as I was researching my story, it's set back in the 50s, and the characters also learn about it and some of the traditions, especially some of the European traditions that were brought over. And now we've kind of lost some of them, but like carving turnips, and then that became carving pumpkins and so forth for a light. And the trick-or-treating, kind of started through souling, which they called. So they would go door to door and asking people if there was a loved one who had died that they could pray for that soul. I guess that happens, with the different holidays. The secular world takes them over and changes them a bit. But it's really was kind of fascinating to find out about these things. And then, of course, the souling goes into with the purgatory and so forth, which we kind of mentioned in the books of how it's so important for us to be praying for those souls who have passed away and to help them find their way, to heaven eventually. But they have a purification process that the Catholic Church believes. And so it's something that the teens often don't ever even think about, or even adults maybe don't know too much about it. So this was an interesting way to bring some of those topics to light through interesting and fun stories. And like I said, some of them have a little bit of a spookier edge. They're not terribly scary or anything, and they're fine for, I think, all age groups, but just a little something to think about in a different way.
Yeah, what's interesting is when I was doing the research, my short story anthology, as you know, is Lucy and the Forbidden Secret, follows my female character Lucy from the Harwood Mysteries. And it's 12th century, and I was trying to, do some research on All Souls Day, All Saints Day. The church didn't always put these days together, which was interesting. It was somewhere right around the time of my story that All Souls Day was moved closer to basically follow All Saints Day. So we have All Hallows Eve, then we have All Saints Day, then we have All Souls Day. But there had been a separation of, I think, of a month or two where before that. So let's start there then, because in the Shadows book, your story very appropriately, I thought, kicks it off. Grace and the Grave Robber is your story, and maybe tell us a little bit about who is Grace? Is she a character that you have used before? And maybe just kind of set up the premise of the story.
Sure. Grace is a character I wrote about before, and she's actually in a full-length novel that has not yet been published. So hopefully someday we'll learn more about her. But in the modern day series of books that I have written, she is a grandmother of some siblings. But in this book, and then also in the short story I did in Treasures, she is a younger girl, early teen, who is going on these adventures in the 50s. Her father is an archaeologist, and so which lends itself to some exciting things that she discovers in life and so forth. So it's been a fun time, but hopefully sometime that book will come out and so people get to know the characters even further. But so in this story, Grace and her family are invited to come to a church where there was a robbery in one of the graves, and some of the items in that crypt were taken. Some of the family members had some specific items that they were keeping in the crypt as almost like a museum. So they were stolen. And so her father is there to help try to identify what these are. And so she and her brother are there during this time where they're having a souling event and All Hallows Eve celebration. And so her and her brother become aware of it, and they meet a few interesting people along the way. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's some fun little some twists and turns in there that I always like to throw in there. But yeah, it's interesting because when we decide to do these anthologies, we just leave it open. We have the theme, and each author kind of just chooses characters they want to write about, whether they are previous characters or brand new characters. And it's always interesting. I feel like the Holy Spirit really guides us because the stories work together so well, and no one's ever has kind of the same thing, but they overlap a little bit in a perfect way. And it's always amazing how it all turns out. And with this one, with the 3 different days, some cover all of them and some just cover 1 or 2. But again, it had a good spread of talking about all those different days. And so just worked out beautifully.
Yeah, so I love yours because it sets the tone. It talks about the tradition of souling, which I hadn't even heard of. I mean, all my life as a Catholic, I'd never even heard of this idea of going to people's houses and, either getting a prayer card or something in exchange for praying for somebody's soul and their family to be, relieved from purgatory. And what I love is the way that we've set this up. T.M. Gowet's short story ends so there's, what, 7 of us on this? And T.M. Gowett is the seventh story, the far end of the cemetery. And I love it because her story is told from the perspective of one of these people in purgatory who basically is dwelling at the cemetery, waiting for people to pray for him to be able to go to heaven. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit more, especially if people maybe are not used to this idea of, what do you mean somebody's waiting around in the cemetery to be prayed for to go to heaven? That sounds like something we don't hear about very frequently.
Yes, that's very true. And I did not grow up Catholic, so specifically that was a very foreign concept. But over the years, it kind of made sense when different people would explain it. God is so glorious and heaven is so amazing that we have a little bit of cleaning up to do, I guess. Even though we are forgiven for our sins, our soul needs to be cleaned and cleansed for that in order to live in heaven forever. But it is belief of the Catholic Church and isn't something that you do hear much about, but I think it's a great thing to think about, because if people are kind of souls really are waiting and they can't do anything on their own, like that's what we can do for our loved ones, our friends, or even people we don't even know. Because people that aren't part of the Catholic faith, no one is praying for those souls. And so I think it's a beautiful way we can, help those who have passed away and, think about Jesus and God in a new way for ourselves too.
Yeah, and I think the Bible talks about it. It's St. Peter that talks about it as a purifying fire, being saved as through flame. And so there's this idea that you're sort of burning off the impurities that we sort of bring along with us. Yes, Jesus saves us. We're going to go to heaven, but to stand before God, we want to be as pure as we, need to be. And that purifying flame sort of does that. So that was pretty neat because I know some of these, of course, are speculative stories. And T.M. Gowett acknowledges that, I know, in her author's note that, this is speculative. Nobody really knows what purgatory looks like or feels like exactly. So why not use our imaginations a little bit? Speaking of imaginations, I know there are different kinds of stories than you might expect to find in this kind of a book. The way we're talking, it sounds like we have a bunch of cemetery stories. Are there other stories in there that you found are particularly different or unusual?
That's one of my favorite parts of all of our anthologies, because like I said, we just let the authors and their creativity go. And so we often have some that are either historic, so back in the day like yours, or we have a lot of futuristic ones even. Corinna Turner, and quite a few of the anthology collections, brings her characters from her dinosaur series Unsparked. So it's a futuristic world where dinosaurs are once again roaming the earth. And so that just adds so much interest and intrigue and fun also for the stories. And Marie Kaiser this time has one that's set on a spaceship. So you can learn a lot in these books, but some of them are just fun stories. And you get to know a little bit more about different characters if you're not familiar with these authors. So I think these anthologies are just a perfect way for that. When I'm selling my books at events, and they're not sure, because I often bring all the Catholic team books with me, and people aren't really sure if they're going to like something. And I often point to the anthologies and like, this is a great way to get to know the different authors, some of the characters, their styles, and the kinds of stories that we offer. So these anthologies, I'm so glad that we have them. Sometimes a short story connects better with teens too. They don't want a whole full-length novel.
Right, right. So we've already mentioned out of the seven authors, your and my stories, T.M. Gowett's story. You mentioned the science fiction one from Marie Kaiser and Corinna's Jurassic Hallowed Tide. We haven't mentioned yet Teresa Linden or Carolyn Asfalk, and I know that you know both of them pretty well. Maybe just introduce our listeners to the two of them, and they round out our seven authors.
Teresa, she actually has some adult novels about purgatory and so forth. So I feel like she's one who really has done quite a bit of research on these. And hers is also, I believe, set in a cemetery.
Yeah, so
And
I think her main character gets her foot stuck
oh, yes.
in a cemetery in the middle of the night.
And then is kind of stuck there, obviously, literally. And just kind of spooky things come around, but it all kind of works out and she learns a lot. Yeah, that one was a fun one because I don't know, she's such a good author. She has so many things from historic fiction to contemporary. She's so good. And then Carolyn's, that one was an interesting one. I hadn't heard of some of the things that she had discovered in her research, and that one's set mostly in a church.
Yeah, and I think she brings in some Irish traditions that I hadn't heard about. Of course, I grew up Italian, so why would I know Irish traditions? But all right, so we've got a lot of different kinds of stories here set around this Halloween theme, appropriate for all ages. So maybe talk about that a little bit. Your site, which I was very happy to be able to join. I think I was like your 16th out of 17 authors. So I'm very much a Johnny come lately and the only guy. That's my one claim for fame. I'm the only guy in the Catholic Teen Book Circle. But why write stories for teens? Why have a website specifically devoted to apparently Catholic teens? Maybe speak a little bit to that.
Goes back to when I first wrote my first book, The Perfect Blind Side. I didn't even really know that there were other authors who wrote specifically for Catholic teens. And my books the characters are Catholic, but they work well for Christian, which a lot of our stories do. But when I discovered that there were some other ones, Susan Peak and I were doing an event somewhere at a Catholic homeschooling conference, and we were sharing about all these great Catholic teen fiction books that we knew of. And one of the parents said, well, it's great that there's a bunch out there, but it'd be great, even better if you had them all in one site, make it easier for us. And we thought, well, that's a great idea. So we contacted a few of the other people we knew. And so we started Catholic Teen Books, and we've been inviting others to join us. And it is a great resource, and we keep growing. I'd like to even include more authors. It just takes a little while because we do read every single book to make sure it fits well, it's written well, and it fits the Catholic faith. So it just takes a little while to grow that way. But we think it's important for parents to know the books that we offer, are aligned with the faith, and there's nothing kind of crazy. We also have parental guidelines on there because some of the people, the books are more middle grade, like some of yours. And then there's some of the books are for much older teens. So we have parental guidelines on there so you know exactly what's in the book, and so you don't have to worry about it and what age appropriateness and so forth. But the books we have saint books, we have historic fiction, mysteries, romance. We have just such a wide variety. But especially as it gets crazier and crazier in this world, it's nice to have books that parents can trust and know that there's nothing crazy in these books, but there's good messages, and they don't have to worry about what their teens are reading.
Yeah, like you said, I know some of the books are explicitly Catholic, some are even on specific saints, which wouldn't be all that unusual because there's a lot of those books you can find out there. What I really love about our authors, though, is they really push all different genre, envelopes. So you mentioned, some of the dystopian novels that Corinna writes, not only dinosaurs, but also she has her I Am Margaret series with all that, kind of future world of persecution of Christians. And we've got science fiction, we've got history, we've got a lot of contemporary. Carolyn has that beautiful book on chastity with teenagers. Such a diversity of books, but some of them might not have very much Catholicism at all in them. Some of them are just, more generically Christian or just stronger values. But at least, like you said, families can go to the site and know that whatever they're going to get there is not going to be offensive to their values, which is important. So what about some of the other things related to our website, CatholicTeenBooks.com? If a parent were to go there or a grandparent looking for a book, what else might they find on that website?
We keep trying to think of new things that, will be a great resource for parents. So like I said, we have all the books listed and their age appropriateness and so forth, and the parental guidelines. But we also offer some book packs, which can be great for like families, homeschooling, or really good for schools, like Catholic schools. So they have different themes. And so that's on there. So 5 or 6 different books at a discounted price that are around a specific theme. We have a newsletter and blog that come out with different topics, and we always give away books each month on our newsletter. yeah, we just try to just have so much that we can offer them. We're always trying to think of new things. Oh, we have a book match on there. So you can go on and fill out a form of the kinds of books you like for yourself or for somebody else. And we'll, give you suggestions that might be a good fit for them. We're always happy if we hear from families or parents that have other ideas or suggestions for us and so forth. We're always trying to just be that resource for families. And spreading the word is always a little bit difficult, as in everything, but we're hoping to continue reaching families all over.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And I've been really excited to hear. I know Ignatius Press this year has launched their book fairs, which to me sort of are like in competition with Scholastic. There have been some other operations out there, Good News and Christian Book Fair and some others. But Ignatius seems to be doing it big, and I think that's great because then authors like us can have our books kind of going all throughout the country to teens in different schools. But I know you also travel all around the country yourself doing different conferences, talking about our books. Do you want to touch on that for a second?
Sure, thanks. My kids are all grown and out of the house, so this is a stage of life that I am able to go to some of these conferences that are in different places. And I've been trying to take as many of our Catholic teen books with us because it's interesting because we're all spread around the country. And then we have an author, Ellen Gable, is in Canada, and then Corinna Turner is in England. So we're kind of all over the world, really. But around the United States, for instance, if you're in Florida, you might be able to reach a lot of places there, or if someone's in Ohio, they can go to a lot of conferences there. But sometimes our books, it's harder to reach in different places of the country. So I've really been trying to go different places and be able to bring these books to people to a different geographic area that they might not have seen. And we always are trying to reach out to Catholic bookstores too. But if you have one that you like, I'm sure that they would be happy to look up some of our books and carry them. But it's a hard thing where I live in Colorado. They don't really have a lot of fiction books. And so it is a hard thing for where families can find these types of books. So we're just trying always to be out there through conferences, through talking to schools and so forth to get the word out there.
What kind of feedback are you getting from teens, especially when you go to these conferences? Do you ever meet any teens who've read any of our books? And, what kind of feedback have you heard over the years?
Well, one of the conferences I've been at for about 4 or 5 years now is the Midwest Family Conference in Wichita. It's every first weekend in August. And because I've been there for a number of years now, starting to recognize people, and they have been coming up, and it's so fun to hear because the teens get so excited as they're growing, they start with a middle grade book and they oh, I love this one, what else can you recommend? And so it's been really fun. And sadly, I hear from other people, that, oh, teens, they don't really want to read anymore. They're on their phones and video games. But when I'm at these places and I see the joy and the excitement of them with their books that they have, your books are often ones that I'm always selling out of because they're like, you have the newest one of Tony's book? And so it really is heartwarming. And I love that. So it's sometimes we don't get to that feedback that we are reaching people. So when you are able to get that, it really is like, okay, God's got this plan for us and we are on the right track.
Beautiful. All right. So if folks want to get a copy of Shadows, Visible and Invisible, which is the name of the anthology, or any of our other anthologies, or frankly, if they want to just learn more about all the different Catholic authors we've been talking about, where should they go?
Yeah, the best place is catholicteenbooks.com. We all have our own websites, and those are linked. You can find our personal links of our websites on Catholic Teen Books too. But that's kind of the easiest one. And all the books are on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, wherever you find books. Good News Book Fair has been carrying all of our books for us too. So that's a good resource. But yeah, so I would say Catholic Teen Books is a really good place to start, and then you can peruse all the different things that we offer and all the different genres and authors. So it's a good spot for you to check out.
All right. And if people are your fans in particular and want to know, hey, how do I get some of Leslie's books, especially the one coming out in December in time for Christmas, where would you want them to go?
My website is lesleawall.com. My name's spelled a little different. I do a newsletter too, and I also review a lot of different books, Christian and Catholic books for families, because I just think that it's so important for families to have good resources and to find fun books. So I have a whole section on my website of different book recommendations as well.
Wonderful. Well, it's so great to have you back on the show again, talking about this anthology. It's always fun to hear what all of us at Catholic Teen Books are doing. So thanks so much for coming on the show again.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always fun to chat with you.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the show today. We've been speaking with Leslea Wahl about Shadows, Visible and Invisible, the Halloween-themed anthology from CatholicTeenBooks.com. If you are interested in my books or want me to come talk to your middle school classroom, definitely check out my website also, which is AntonyKolenc.com. But until next time, may God bless us as we rely on our faith to work through the messy challenges of our lives.